mess.
Yeah.
It's a total mess.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think this.
We do some good things, but
it saved my life.
Mess.
I had pneumonia once. I can say Western medicine did save my life. They're great for that.
We're great at infectious disease, like severe infectious disease. We're great at trauma, but everything else, you probably want to take care of yourself.
All right, guys. Dr. Kirk Parsley here today. We're going to talk Navy SEALs, talk peptides, and a bunch of fun health stuff. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. We were talking out there. I was just so fascinated that the SEALs are dealing with some major issues.
Yeah. A lot of people just think military guys are young and indestructible and they can just keep going forever. It's like any other organization. It takes years to get really good at it.
Yep.
To be proficient, to be a leader, to be able to, plan and lead missions and things. You're looking at a decade or more to be in there, which is a lot of training and a lot of deployments and a lot of battle and a lot of injuries and a lot of sleep deprivation and a lot of psychological trauma, for lack of a better word, and all that stuff. And it pays. It costs. It weighs on the individual. And they are very strong, very resilient, very capable men, but they're not indestructible, right? And they do start breaking down, and their performance does start to decline for reasons that are by and large repairable. Mm-hmm. But you want to talk about a stilted, overly conservative medical organization? Nothing's worse than military medicine. I mean, they're very staunchy, old school kind of, anything that our troops have to have disqualifies them, right?
Yep.
Because if they have to have a medication, well, then you can't deploy them because what if they don't have their medication? So it's a tough battle, and there's a lot of political stuff in there that upsets people too, because like technically when say somebody wants to do transgender, whatever, and they need hormones, those people are considered okay and they're still deployable. But if a SEAL needs hormones to be not above normal, but just to be like high in the high reference range of what his age group should be, the upper say 25% of that range. If you need, or if you just want to take them out of the tank, like I see a lot of guys who, they're only in the normal range by 1 point out of like a 800 point range, right? Yep. So they're 1 point into it, but that's normal. And you can't give them hormones, even though, it's much different than what people think of when they think of cheating in sports. Like cheating in sports, like a high end of normal would be 1,100. Somebody who's cheating in sports is probably going to be like 1,500 or 2,000 something. They're going outside to be superhuman.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we just want to get them up to the 900 range, right? To be in the high normal, which they had, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There's no logic to saying that that's dangerous, mm-hmm. right? I mean, if you're just putting somebody back to where they were when they were younger. So it's a lot of politics. I don't know if you heard about the whole drama a couple of years ago with a SEAL trainee or BUDS trainee, not a SEAL yet. He'd gone through Hell Week and then he died mm-hmm. the night of recovery. And they were just trying to burn the officer in charge of that command as though it was something that he'd done wrong. And fortunately, he went on Sean Ryan's podcast, and that podcast called enough attention to it where they reversed everything. And they're really going after this guy and the doctor who was a friend of mine. And this kid was abusing drugs, man. He's abusing, testosterone and growth hormone and like all sorts of peptides and who knows what else. And it was all, it was all bootleg illegal stuff. He wasn't getting treated by a doctor. He was just doing all this on his own. And that's resulted in SEALs now being WADA tested, which is like the strictest, governing board. So I don't know if they can get randomly tested like WADA athletes, but they have to meet that same criteria, which is crazy. I mean, there's like caffeine limits on that. I mean, there's all sorts of Like they can't take over-the-counter DA.
All right, shout out to today's sponsor, Specialized Recruiting Group. Navigating the professional job search is hard. You know the perfect job is out there. You're just not sure how to find it. The good news is you don't have to go at it alone. You just need Specialized Recruiting Group. Connect at srgpros.com. We're here to guide you and help you find a role that fits, all without costing a dime. Meet Specialized Recruiting Group, offering a tailored approach to find your next role. Go to srgpros.com and get on the right course. Your local Specialized Recruiting Group team knows which businesses are hiring and can offer you a path to contract and full-time roles. Don't see the role you're looking for on the website? Well, they also recruit for confidential roles, so give an office near you a call to learn more. Take the next step in your career by starting srgpros.com.
HEA, which is a supplement anybody in America can go buy.
Yeah, that's a longevity supplement, right?
Yeah, I mean, and SEALs can't go buy that, you know.
Right.
They can't go buy that and take that now because it's, you know, political reasons. So
yeah,
it's sad.
This is mind blowing to me because when I think of a SEAL, I think of someone who's high testosterone, super healthy. But we were just talking out there, and you're saying some of these guys' levels are super low.
Yeah, I mean, so I was the doctor there for about 3 years, a little over 3 years. And of course, it's self-selection bias, right? But the guys who came to see me, I'd say the average guy was probably early 30s and had not just testosterone, but the full anabolic profile. So like growth hormone, testosterone, DHEA, IGF-1, like all of kind of the markers for anabolic activity. They'd have about the same level of like what a fat 50-year-old, fat 60-year-old man would have.
Wow.
And they're like six-pack, ripped, you know, great shape, 32 years old, 30 years old.
Yeah.
Saw that all the time. And that has to do with the head injuries of the job. It has to do with the sleep deprivation, use of sleep drugs, use of alcohol for sleep and all that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what got me into the career that I do now.
Yeah, and that was the first problem you tackled, the sleep, right?
The sleep, yeah. So, the guys were coming to my office, and SEALs don't trust doctors because a doctor can put you on the bench. He's the most likely person to put you on the bench. And the worst thing you can do to a SEAL is put him on the bench, right? That's not just his job; it's his identity, yeah. It's his community, it's everything. Like SEALs are SEALs, like first and foremost, and that's all we are when we're SEALs. Is like that's it, we're SEALs. And we might be a SEAL who's also married, but we're a SEAL first, right? You know, that's the way it goes. And so they don't want to be put on the bench, so they don't trust their doctors with their problems, and a lot of times they'll go out into town and they'll spend money out of their pockets to have a doctor outside of the military treat them.
Wow.
To help.
So they'll hide their injuries and everything.
And so because I'd been a SEAL and I'd been a SEAL recently enough to where there were a lot of SEALs there that I'd trained with and deployed with and stuff, the guys trusted me and they would come in and close the door and go, "Hey man, let me tell you what's really going on with me." And really, if you just think of like what a kind of fat, pre-diabetic, 55, 65-year-old man would come and tell you, that's what these guys were telling me.
Jeez.
And I had no idea. I was like, I don't know, but I'll help. We'll figure it out together, right? And so I just, the good thing was the SEALs, like when I was a SEAL, nobody knew what a SEAL was. So it wouldn't have been helpful. But
movies hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, the movies and Bin Laden and all that stuff, like none of that happened. But when I was treating these guys, they already kind of had this celebrity status. And so if I saw somebody's TED Talk or heard them lecture or read their book, I'd call them and be, "Hey, I'm the doctor for the West Coast SEALs. Can I consult with you, run patients by you? Can I, whatever, come train with you?" And every single guy that I talked to was like, "Sure, I'd love to help." Nobody ever charged me for mentorship, and I just got to learn a whole new way of treating people. It took me out of like sick disease care into this performance optimization world is what I call it.
Right.
It's like taking people who are relatively healthy compared to the general population, and SEALs, of course, exceptionally healthy compared to the general population. But there's a delta between what you're capable of, what you're capable of, and what you can actually do at this moment, and like how do we close that delta?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of the same stuff that a longevity doctor would do, but I don't know how long you're going to live, so I can't really promise you longevity, right? You could work with me and die tomorrow. You could work with me and not die till you're 90, but maybe you're going to live to 95 if you didn't work with me. I don't know. So I don't I'm not comfortable with saying longevity, but it's a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
you're basically improving their numbers.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is that if I can make, my goal is basically as I take your lab, but you know, everything that I know how to measure, and now there's all kinds of wearables and there's all sorts of stuff that there's genetics, you know, epigenetics, there's all kinds of things we can test now that I couldn't do then, but everything that I know how to measure and everything I know how to have impact on, I know what a 25-year-old healthy athletic man looks like, right? If we use that as the baseline and we say, hey, I want all your metrics to look like, if I gave your packet to a colleague of mine and said, who do you think this is? They'd say a fit 25-year-old athletic male, right? Which means you have the most potential at that point, right? You're the most resilient. You know, as far as what we can measure, your capability of being strong, your capability of being enduring, and your capability of handling injury and recovering from disease, which is essentially youth, right? And what's the difference between a kid who falls down the stairs and an 80-year-old who falls down the stairs? What resources do you have to recover from that? Well, when you're 80, not many, and that's why a lot of people die, right? When you're a kid, it's like, oh, you're metabolically healthy, strong, your hormones are up, your healing is super fast and all, and you know, you're just more pliable, more athletic, whatever. And so a little kid can recover from something that an older person can't. And really what being older means, in the sense that we don't like aging, you know, is that we have fewer resources and we're more vulnerable to disease, or more vulnerable to death, or more vulnerable to any kind of serious injury doing the same thing. And so if I can make you stronger and faster and more enduring, and you know, you can choose what you want to be good at. This could be all, like, you could, like, some of my clients, they focus 100% on cognition, right? They just want to be smarter. They want their brains to be better. They want to be able to, like, they're big CEOs or something. They want to be smarter in the boardroom, or better entrepreneurs, whatever. You can drive it wherever you want to, but we know what metabolically, physiologically healthy looks like. Yeah. And that's what I shoot for. And if I'm keeping you physiologically healthy and you're 60 and your markers look like that of a 25-year-old, I would have to guess that I'm probably extending your life, right?
Probably.
Like if we can do this for the rest of your life, and you know, the whole health span idea that you're just healthy, and then you just die one day, instead of this constant decline, the slow trickle down from 50 down to 85, where you're just getting worse and worse and worse. We just try to cut that off, like make that a square where you just fall off a cliff one day.
Yeah,
hopefully, but time will tell. I can't say that's true yet, because I've only been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah,
so.
You'll probably need another 40, 60 years, right?
Yeah.
Do you focus mainly on the physical side, or do you do any of the trauma work, the mental side?
I work with all of it. Like, I'm not a therapist or psychotherapist or anything like that. I mean, I'll talk to the patients to the limit of my expertise, but I work with I work with experts on everything, right? Yeah. So, I'll send people. There's people I trust that do kind of anything that you're interested in. Breath work, yoga, meditation, Kundalini yoga, mindfulness training. I'll send people to that. I have therapists, marital therapists, people that I refer to, who I'm really familiar with their work, and I can do maybe 30% of what they do, and then they got to pass them on if you get more complex than that. Psychedelics, I'll send people out to psychedelics.
Have you seen success with that route?
Amazing.
Really?
Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Psychedelics were a big surprise to me.
Yeah,
big surprise to me. I grew up rural Texas, very, very redneck. Like, we do think of just like, beer was the only good drug, in the world. And I didn't like anybody who did any kind of drugs. And I always thought that psychedelics is just a hippie excuse, different way of getting high. Right. Yeah. And that's what I thought it was. And then I had a SEAL who had a really bad, brain injury. He was in a vehicle that had run over an IED and had blown up, and it broke his neck. He didn't become a paraplegic, or he wasn't paralyzed from it, but by the grace of God, like he had a ton of reason to be paralyzed, but he wasn't. But he had just unrelenting headaches and psychological issues and pain issues and all kinds of stuff. And so he was getting med boarded out of the military, and he was on the typical cocktail. They start with an antidepressant, and they add something else, add another antidepressant, and then they got to give you some Adderall to keep you awake during the day for the depressants they're giving you to get you asleep at night. And end up on antipsychotics and pain medications and the whole thing. And I saw this play out a few dozen times when I was the doctor there. Guys would be on between 13 to 17 pharmaceuticals.
Holy crap.
And this one guy that I had was really, really, really bitter. He was scary. Like the only time I've really been scared as a doctor, and he came in my office every day because he didn't have a job. He was just getting med boarded out, and he came in my office every day and sat in there for hours. And I literally thought he might murder suicide. Like he would, like he was so angry at the system that was taking his career away from him, and then he got out, and I didn't hear from him for about 6 months. And then I ran into him again. He was so transformed that I didn't recognize him.
Wow.
So he's a guy who'd been sitting in my office, 4 or 5 days a week for 6 months. So I know what he looks like. I got a lot of experience with him. And I sat this close to him for 20 minutes talking to him, could not figure out who he was. And he finally said something, and I was like, oh my God. And I said his name, and he's like, who'd you think I was? I was like, I don't know. I still don't think you're that guy. Like you look, and I have pictures of him like before and after. You can't tell the difference. Like you cannot tell it's the same guy.
Did he lose a lot of weight?
He lost a bit of weight because the psychotropic drugs had put some weight on him. But it wasn't huge. I mean, he's a big guy. He's bigger than me. So I think he's probably like 280 or something in the teams. He maybe got down to like 250 or something.
Oh, wow.
So he had lost some weight, but still a really big guy. But facial expression, the way he talked, his posture, I swear his eyes were dark brown or black when he came in my office, and they're bright blue when I saw him. And I was like, I don't believe this is the same guy. And now he's super successful, like doing all kinds of amazing stuff in Hollywood.
Wow.
He's the producer of I don't play video games. Call of Duty. Like
he's a producer.
He's a producer of that.
Holy crap.
Like great dude. He's comfortable with me telling the story. And so I was like, what'd you do? Like what happened? He said, well, I got out of the military and I threw all my meds in the trash, and I got on a plane and I flew down to Peru, and I lived with a shaman in the Amazon jungle for 30 days, nude for some reason. I don't understand that part, but whatever. So nude in the jungle for 30 days. I think like he did Kundalini yoga like 8 hours a day. And then I want to say he said like every third night he did ayahuasca. And I was like, all right, man, like I'm sold. Like, because nothing in medicine, we didn't have anything, right? Neurology and psychiatry and psychology all combined couldn't do 5% of what the change I'd seen in him. And it had only been 6 months. And he had been treated for 4 or 5 years when he was sitting in my office, right? So, and it was just getting worse. So I was like, all right, well, I'll have an open mind about that. And then some doctors approached me who were doing at an Ibogaine clinic down in Mexico, which is, they call like the father or the grandfather of a psychedelic. It's like the most harsh, it's the most stern teachers. Like you aren't escaping. There's not going to be unicorns and butterflies. Like this is going to be a hard lesson. And I had a buddy who was just a guy that I had gone through SEAL training with and been my friend my whole life, and very similar to that guy I was telling you about. And he was just at his wit's end, and I was like, let's go try this Ibogaine thing. And amazing transformation, amazing. Like I watched it because I was there with him. Yeah. And then the next day when he got up, I was like, wow, I cannot believe this is like he became the 18-year-old kid I met again, like he just looked lighter. Like his mood was totally different, smiling for the first time. And I don't remember the last time I'd seen him smile before that. And it's not, it's not a permanent change, but it gives you an opportunity to make permanent changes, right? So psychedelics increase something called neuroplasticity, right? I'm sure you've heard of that, right? It's your ability to change the way you think about things, right? Like I'm not a grumpy old man because of my age. I'm a grumpy old man because my brain is like solidified and like this is the right way and that's the wrong way, and like and that makes me grumpy because like I think, well, no, it's this way. Well, neuroplasticity would allow me to think of different things and go, well, maybe purple hair is okay, right? And like but that's a simplistic part of it. And then there's also like, are you familiar with the amygdala, the region of your brain? It's like
Heard of it.
So it's like the alarm center, right? It tells you what to pay attention to, and primarily dangerous things, right? But also attractive, whatever, right? And So you think of any of the primal, feeding, fighting, epping, right? All of that. So you could, these regions kind of walnut size on each side of your brain, and it determines what you pay attention to. And that's the sympathetic nervous system. You probably heard of it. So it's the stress, it's the fight or flight pathway. When that thing maxes out, that's when you're in fight or flight. That's when all of your hormones shift and all that amazing stuff happens. And of course, being in the military and being something like a SEAL, being a combat veteran, like all that stuff makes you more and more amygdala heavy, right? And that's the hypervigilance you hear about people.
Always on edge.
They're always
Same
looking
with
around,
prison too.
Always looking for threats. Like, where's the threat coming from? Everything's a threat. Every facial expression, like, what was that eye twitch? Like, is he right? Is he doing something right? And it's almost a paranoia. The paper hasn't been published yet, but a colleague of mine did the research, and they showed a decrease of amygdala activity, so we call it amygdala tone, decrease of amygdala tone by about 90%.
Holy crap, from Ibogaine?
Yeah, for all the psychedelics. And then the difference is how durable is that change? So psilocybin does it, ayahuasca does it, ibogaine does it. But psilocybin lasts a couple of months. Ayahuasca lasts six to 9 months. Ibogaine can last up to a year.
Damn.
As far as that decrease, now it's not 90% for a year, but it's like significantly decreased amygdala tone, which allows you to drop your ego. You have the neuroplasticity, so you have the ability to change. You have the insight of the experience to go, hey, maybe I should not think of that some way. Maybe I should process this differently. Maybe I should consider changing my approach to these things. And it's the ego death that comes with these heroic journeys. Get your ego out of the way, so now I have less stress. I have a brain that I can actually change, and my ego's not getting in the way. So if I do the work during that window of time that I have, I can change myself significantly.
Wow.
But if I just go do the psychedelic and then go back to my normal life, I'm going to be exactly the way I was before.
It's going to creep back up after a year, right?
Yeah, because I'm still thinking the same way. I'm still processing the same way. For anything you want in the world, for any outcome you want in the world, there's a specific way of acting, but there's also a specific way of thinking that brings that to you, right? If you can't change it, like if you don't have the ability, if you don't have the insight to change it, or enough neuroplasticity, enough good enough sleep, good enough recovery, good enough hormone profile, if you don't have that stuff, you can't make the change.
Right.
And so that gives you an opportunity, a big opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
And it's the most transformational thing that we have. I don't administer it. I have I have colleagues that do, and I refer that out.
Yeah.
When it's appropriate. But I had a super successful experience with a long COVID patient for that. So,
really? Psychedelics?
Yeah. So he's a guy, when I met him, I want to say when I met him, he had been out of work for 2 years and showed no signs of being able to go back to work. And he was seeing Peter McCullough in Dallas, the top COVID guy, and he was doing all the right things. And 90% of what I would have had him do. The only thing I did is I worked with his hormones, and I had him go do psychedelics. And so I can't say it was 100% psychedelics, but he'll tell you that there was a huge shift in his, because he had a lot of neuroinflammation. And that's another thing that they're good for, is they reduce neuroinflammation.
Interesting. Yeah, because they made all the SEALs get the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
So that probably caused some long damage.
Yeah, there's some problems with that, and they were trying to kick some SEALs out for not taking the vaccine.
Yeah.
And fortunately, they hung in the battle long enough for everything to reverse. And
yeah, shout out to those guys, because they were facing a lot of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
and a lot of expense, and and that's an exceptionally tight community, right? So if you're going against your community there, like you're going against yourself, really,
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of courage to do what they did.
Wow, I would have never thought psychedelics would help with something like long COVID. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure that it would always help, but I knew for sure that his specific issue was neuroinflammation, and because it decreases inflammation in the brain, I knew it would help him.
And Hyperbaric helps with that too, right?
Hyperbaric is an amazing tool. I mean,
I'm literally getting one for my house.
Yeah.
They're expensive, but
they are, but they're worth it. And if you get a good one, it'll literally last you your entire life, right? And your whole family can use it, and your friends can use it, and like people, you have friends that have surgery, you can have them come over, and so. And they've come down a lot in the last 5 years. They've gone from over $100,000. You can get a good one now for 50.
Really, the hard shell one,
a hard one, yeah.
Oh wow,
yeah.
When I was looking, they were like $100K.
OxyHealth. OxyHealth has a 44-inch chamber that you sit upright in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like one of these chairs sitting there, and it's at least 2 ATA, but it might be 2.5, and 2 atmospheres is about where you need to match most of the research. And that has an oxygenator instead of having O2 bottles. You only get like 93% oxygen, but it's almost certain that that's insignificantly different as far as what you're doing, because what's happening in hyperbarics is because of that pressure, because you have, right now we have 1 atmosphere by definition sitting on top of us, right? Mm-hmm. When I go to 2 atmospheres, I have twice that, right? But it's not, it's a exponential curve. So when I have 2 atmospheres of pressure, the volume that a certain amount of air or a certain amount of oxygen would take up is cut down to like 1/10, right? So I have, I can put 2,000% more oxygen to all of my tissues at 2 atmosphere.
Wow.
One, because I'm breathing 100% O2 or close to 100% O2. Now, if you breathe 100% O2 right now, it doesn't do anything because your hemoglobin and like your red blood cells are the only place you can carry oxygen. But when you go down in depth, when you increase that pressure and you have 2 atmospheres of pressure on you, you can crush those oxygen bubbles down small enough to where they dissolve in your plasma. Mm. And then you have oxygen in your plasma that's going everywhere in your body. And capillaries are the only place that red blood cells can exchange oxygen, whereas the oxygen in the plasma can leak out anywhere. It can go all over your body. And so you get super oxygenation to all of your tissues, and oxygen is what your mitochondria use to produce energy, to produce ATP. So you basically increase the energy production of every single cell in your body.
Crazy. Yeah, I had a TBI and I went to a place nearby.
They're great for TBI.
Yeah,
great.
And I paid like $50 a session or whatever, and it went away, dude. Yeah, I just got my brain scanned. It's completely gone now. Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy?
What's really crazy is that it works for TBIs that are like 10 years old.
Yeah, mine was old because I don't even remember getting mine.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was from childhood or something.
Yeah. So there's a pretty good acceptance in the medical community that it will work for what they call an acute injury. So it's like you get in a car crash today, they take you to a chamber, maybe high estimate, maybe 50% of the medical community would say, yeah, that's a good idea, smart use. But if you told somebody I have a 10-year-old TBI, they'd be like, it's not going to help. But it does. Because when your brain's inflamed, it doesn't have anywhere to go, right? Because your skull doesn't allow, like your brain can't swell. I mean, it can swell a little bit, but then it just increases the pressure inside your skull. And when you increase the pressure, you're fighting your blood pressure basically, right? And so then you get less perfusion to the brain. You get less blood flow to the brain because you have pressure pushing on there and reducing the ability of the blood to flow. And that can last for years, decades. And it's pretty hard to measure without like cutting a hole in somebody's head. When you super oxygenate people with hyperbarics, 10, 20-year-old brain injuries, and all of a sudden, cognition changes, hormone production changes because all of your hormones are regulated by your brain.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah, so it's an absolute game changer.
And a lot of military guys have brain issues, right?
Almost all of them.
Wow.
Almost all of them.
Because the explosions.
Yeah, so when I first went through medical training, this is remarkable how fast medicine changes. When I first went through medical training, in order to have a TBI, right, traumatic brain injury, you had to be physically hit in the head and you had to lose consciousness. So you take either one of those out and they said it wasn't a TBI.
Wow.
As an example, my buddy who I was telling you I took to do Ibogaine, he had a grenade go off at his feet and it came up here and some of it went through palate of it, like through his soft palate and then through his hard palate into his brain. So he actually has grenade material inside of his brain.
Holy crap.
But he never lost consciousness. So when he was getting out of the military, his medical record said he didn't have a TBI. And I was like, wait a second, like what's more traumatic to the brain than having foreign material in there? Like that's got to account for more than getting knocked out, right? But in 2010, I went to a medical conference, and there's a lot of things going on, and I just saw this one lecture on TBI, and I had one patient. So I was focusing mainly on sleep when I first got to the SEAL teams, because that was such a big mover for everything that was going on with them. But they'd sent me a guy from a combat zone. They'd sent him home because he hadn't slept in a week, because he'd had an RPG hit right next to his head on a wall.
Jeez.
And it was enough of a blast where it caused sort of some disruption in his brain where he couldn't sleep. And so I was like, I have a TBI patient. I'm going to go listen to what this guy has to say. And he starts throwing up his case reports. And he had been working with pugilists, like MMA fighters, bare knuckle boxers, and NFL guys. And he starts throwing up his labs, the same labs that I'd been running on the SEALs, identical patterns.
Wow.
Identical. And I was like, whoa, maybe I've missed this, because I'm thinking it's all sleep. And so I talked to him for a little bit afterwards. I got some references. I went home and started studying it. And what they found was that you can get a mild TBI from the acceleration changes on a roller coaster.
Whoa.
So 1.09 Gs was the minimum force to cause a very, very mild TBI. And then you keep going through the literature, and they started talking about what they call this overpressurization injury. So a hard room like this with these very sturdy walls, if we were in this room shooting M4s, right?
Yeah.
Every bullet that comes out is 35 Gs of blast force. And if you have 4 guys in this room and everybody's shooting multiple times, and you do that multiple times a day, well, you're getting traumatic brain injuries, because what some really brilliant guy did, and it was because of one of our SEALs who had suicided, he came up with this idea to test it. He built a completely transparent skull out of some sort of epoxy, that simulated the density of bone. And he built a brain inside with all the layers with different materials to represent the different densities. And then he fired off a blast and had high-speed photography on it, and he could watch the blast wave, just like when you see a blast wave on television and all the trees move and the car sways and all the dust flies and all this. Well, the brain moves the same way.
Whoa.
But what happens is the brain, every different density moves at a different rate, just like the car moves at a different rate than the leaves on the tree, right? So different densities move slower or faster. And so it caused a shearing effect. So like everywhere there was 2 different densities. So like where the dural sac is laying across, say, blood vessels, well, that shears off because they're vibrating and they're moving at a different rate. And then where the blood vessels meet the gray matter, and that shears off. And then where the gray matter meets the white matter, or the white matter meets the gray matter, and that shears off. And then where the vesicles meet. And so when we were doing autopsies on SEALs who had suicided, we found these plaques around their entire brain. It didn't make any sense, because usually it's like a TBI, you have a foci, like a focal point of where you've been hit. Like football players will have it. The CT is like right here and right here, depending on what side of the line they play or whatever, right? And they were like, why is it all over the brain? Well, that's what it was. It's an interface of different densities. So every time it's sheared. And so we have anti-tank weapons that are 200 Gs.
Holy crap.
So it's 200 G for the guy shooting it, 300 G for the guy spotting.
Oh my gosh.
And you have, if you're in the back of a Humvee with a 50 cal shooting, it's like 65 Gs inside. Like I said, the M4's in a room, 30 to 35 Gs for every time you're pulling the trigger, and you have 4 guys coming in the room, and you move to the next room, and you move to the next room, and you do that for 10 hours a day for for weeks and months. And how many thousands of brain injuries do our guys have? So I do a lot of volunteer work now for SEALs who are getting out. Mm-hmm. And the first thing, I just assume they have brain injury. So I do all their labs. Their hormones always suck. Yeah. Their inflammation's always high. Their oxidation's always high. Their insulin sensitivity sucks. Their anabolic hormones are low. Their catabolic hormones are high. Same pattern I was seeing when I was the doctor there. And I just automatically assume, well, you have some brain injury stuff. So let's get the hormones in order, see how much corrects, and then we'll start slowly moving down the ladder of importance. So In an ideal world, I'd have like a fleet of chambers I could just drive around and drop off at guys' houses, because a lot of guys live rurally, and and it's a big time commitment to do hyperbarics.
Yeah, it's like an hour.
So it's an hour a day, 5 days a week. If you got to drive 30 minutes or so to get there and change clothes, whatever, it's like you're talking about your whole morning, like every day, and what we call a table 8, which is kind of like the standard treatment protocol. That's 8 weeks. So it's 40 chamber dives. And so we have these guys who live, they're not within 5 or 6 hours of a chamber.
Jeez.
And, they live in some rural community. So I've been trying to develop, I've been trying to raise interest and money to just put chambers in trailers, like air conditioned trailers, and just be able to drop them off.
That'd be smart if you could take them portable.
Yeah.
Drive around.
Yeah. And just drop it off there for a month or two and like teach them how to use it, and then their whole family could use it.
There's definitely a gap in the market because they're so expensive. So most guys can't afford them. Yeah. But to rent one, there's not many. Even in Vegas, there's a good amount here. But if you live in like Pahrump or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not even, you'd be surprised at how many towns and cities don't have them. Like one of my patients lives in Santa Fe.
Mm-hmm. They don't have one there?
No. Closest chamber to him is 3 hours away.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I have a patient who's up in Maine who's like on the border of Canada, and like he's, I don't know, probably 10 hours from a chamber.
Jeez.
And he lives in kind of like Ted Kaczynski kind of cabin, up in the woods or whatever, So it's like, but he needs it in a bad way. And there's very few things that I think are as powerful as hyperbarics. Like hyperbarics, and again, surprisingly, psychedelics they're an amazing tool. I don't think you can. I don't know for sure. Nobody knows yet. We're still doing the research, but I don't think you can like continue to use psychedelics and get the same benefit. I think there's 1 or 2 exposures is kind of most of the benefit you're going to get, and it's the work you do afterwards that matters. But you have to be metabolically and physiologically healthy enough to do the work afterwards. Right. So if you just get that, but your hormones are still sucked and you're metabolically broken, and you don't have any energy, you can't stay awake, you're depressed all the time. It's like that's not really it's not gonna help you.
Yeah.
And I'd say the next thing are the peptides. There's peptides that help.
Yeah.
Like something like cerebral lysin does a lot of the same things that psychedelics does, increases neuroplasticity. The hyperbarics grows new blood vessels in your brain or your whole body. Something called angiogenesis. Hormone therapy does the same thing. Some peptides can do the same thing. The psychedelics help with that. So there's a lot of things you can do to recover from brain injury, but if you look at traditional medicine, they don't have a whole lot of answers for you, right?
Yeah, and it's nuts because I know so many veterans and none of them are aware of this brain injury.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who he ejected from a Navy jet, an F-22, I think. He ejected at the speed of sound, pulling 4Gs.
Holy crap.
0 survivability event until he did it. So he's the only person to ever survive anything close to that. And huge, long trauma story. I mean, it goes on for years. He actually got healthy enough to go back to flying jets. Nobody even thought he would ever walk again. They weren't even sure if he'd talk again. The amount of brain injury he had. And then he got back to flying jets and then started having a lot of cognitive issues. Ended up in a psych ward against his will, a ward of the state, and on completely sedating psychotropic drugs. And fortunately, he had lawyers and doctors in the family that were able to get him out. And he went back home, but was still psychotic and still had tons of problems. And psilocybin. He had a buddy who had worked with, I think, the Warrior Foundation, and said, "Hey, you should try the psilocybin thing." And the story I've heard a dozen times now, if not more. He went and did psilocybin, and he's never needed another psychotropic drug. Never had any hallucinations again. Never had any psychotic issues. He does ultra marathons now and across the country mountain bike races, and he's written a book. He goes around. He's on the speaking circuit. He'd be a great guest for you.
Yeah, I'd love to interview him.
Fascinating story. I was riveted the first time I heard that story. I was like, "What? What? And then what?" And it's just unbelievable. It has to be a movie one day. It's like it's the most inspiring thing you've ever heard in your life. It's
that one hits deep with me because my dad was in a psych ward. I think that whole system is terrible.
Oh, this is terrible.
I mean, he died shortly after. Yeah. They put you on all sorts of medication.
Yeah, it's a terrible and a lot of, and I don't want to say a lot of, but there's a substantial number of that's like medically induced. It's classic. People say it's in the medical literature. A lot of stuff in medical schools just taught us fact, and you don't know.
Yeah.
You're trying to learn as much as you can. You just repeat the fact, and you say it's true. One of the things you learn is that for some reason there's a significant number of people that come out of like a cabbage, right, or coronary artery bypass grafts of whatever, triple, double, triple, quadruple, whatever, and they'll come out of it and they'll be bipolar, or they'll be manic, or they'll come out and have some kind of psychiatric disease that they've never had before. Well, they're throwing clots up to the brain doing the surgery,
Wow.
because they're so long under. But they don't get treated like they have clots. They get treated like they have a psychiatric illness.
Holy crap.
And they end up in hospitals and stuff too.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's super concerning.
Yeah. Medicine's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a total mess.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think this.
We do some good things, but
it saved my life.
Mess.
I had pneumonia once. I can say Western medicine did save my life. They're great for that.
We're great at infectious disease, like severe infectious disease, and we're great at trauma. But everything else, you probably want to take care of yourself.
I mean, look what they're doing with peptides. They're banning it.
Yeah.
Most psychedelics are banned.
Yeah. We are making some headway with the psychedelics, actually. Some friends of mine are really involved in the lobbying for that.
Nice.
Like, I don't want to say the battle's won, not by a long shot, but there is a lot more buy-in than people would realize. It's kind of quiet buy-in, but lots of congressmen and senators are like, like you should keep doing that, and like we'll give you a little approval or whatever. You can do a research grant on that. So there's some buy-in on that, and that is getting better. But yeah, the peptides, that's a whole big medicine problem that everybody's heard of. Big pharma influence, and then pharma influence is really tied to pharmacy influence, right? So, as an example, during COVID, a few weeks into COVID, really high-ranking officer in the Austin PD called me with COVID, and all they had told this patient is, get a pulse ox and go home, and if your pulse ox gets below this, come back. And it was not an acceptable answer. I'm like, and we already had, this protocol that with the hydroxychloroquine and the budesonide inhalements. There's a whole series of there's a whole protocol out that was being adopted daily. It was being adjusted daily by a team of doctors worldwide, and it was I don't want. I'll mess up the name, but it was like that. Simone Gold was associated with, and all that group. I think there's 4 C's, critical care, something, whatever. But that whole protocol, I couldn't prescribe it because the pharmacies wouldn't let me.
Wow. And
I was like, you're a pharmacist. Like you're not seeing the patient. You don't have any idea what the patient's going through. You have no idea what the patient's history is. You have no idea. You can't give hydroxychloroquine for COVID. And I'm like, why not? I can give it for scleroderma. I can give it for all kinds of other stuff. No, you just can't do it for that. Why? And then that empowered them. And then they started doing the same thing with ivermectin. And then I had a pharmacist a few months ago tell me that, tell my patient that he was on too much testosterone, and then ask me for the patient's labs to justify the testosterone level.
Wow.
And I was giving him 120 milligrams of testosterone a week, which is what the average male makes in a week. It was not high at all, not even close to being high. The pharmacists didn't know what they were talking about. But I mean, we had to come to Jesus talk, and that pharmacist backed down. But the medical system's broken. Money's driving everything. Like the money and bureaucratic influence is driving everything, and not the patient care, not the doctors either.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for the doctors because they want the best. But.
Of course, like doctors don't. Doctors aren't into this to screw their patients over and get sick. Like they want to. Nothing makes a doctor feel better than solving their patient's problem.
Right.
Like you come to me with a problem and I help you solve it, and you're like, I'm totally fixed. I did my job. Like I'm happy about that. Right. I'm not going to be like, oh well, secretly I'm only going to give him half the solution so that he'd keep buying medicine from me. Like I don't make money off of pharmaceuticals anyways. It's illegal. So, but Yeah, it's a broken system.
Yeah, it's a tough
It's a
space.
very, very broken system. Unfortunately, I don't really play within it. Like I don't really do disease care, so it's not a big issue for me. But them banning, the peptides, most of these peptides have been around 50, 60 years. They're used in other countries. There's a lot of research on them, but it's competing with drugs. And they're like, we don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
And so, you get one pharmacy that's really good at making, the right varieties. They have good quality control, good product, and doctors like me will flood to them and start ordering them, and then they grow and they're super successful, and the FDA comes and shuts them down.
Bans them.
And then they do it over and over and over again. And then about 9 months ago now, the FDA just said all of these peptides are banned, and it was the vast majority of the peptides I use.
Crazy.
Like 80% of the peptides I use.
I thought that was just in Cali. Was that the whole country?
Whole country.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
But RFK put out a tweet the day after he got announced to whatever that position is being called that he's going to, and it's one of the first things he listed. He said, "I'm gonna work on hormones, peptides, hyperbaric stem cells, something else, like all the stuff that I have trouble with, and all the stuff that are like the primary movers of my career."
Yeah.
Psychedelics, he mentioned psychedelics.
That's huge. Yeah, even stem cells, you got to fly to like
yeah, you got to go out of
Mexico
the country for
or
it.
something.
Makes no sense whatsoever.
Because they're not as strong here, right?
Well, they don't let people do them here.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't harvest them from the same sources.
Crazy. And then they'll raid a raw dairy farm.
Yeah.
These poor farmers.
Go kill the squirrel. Yeah. Like the stuff they do. It's insane.
I had that guy on the show actually.
Oh, did you?
The squirrel guy, yeah.
That's such a crazy story.
Yeah.
Like that. Saturday Night Live couldn't write something that stupid, like you can't parody it anymore. It's like the reality is more ridiculous than the parody of it.
Yeah. I mean, he literally had an animal sanctuary, was having kids come and making their day.
Yeah, I've read all about it. I saw a few videos he did. I'm like, I mean, that was a pure power trip.
It's nuts.
The story's just dumb too. It's like, what was their story that it bit one of
rabies.
Bit one of the people, and they had to put it down to see if it had rabies or something. It's like, all right, first of all, if you're in animal control, you should have had gloves on handling the squirrel, right? I mean, come on. You did. They did. And it probably didn't bite them anyway.
No shot.
And they just said, and you don't have to kill it. Like if you can control it and you put it in a cage, you can observe it for 10 days.
Yeah.
So it's like it was all.
And the poor raccoon they killed for no reason too.
That's insane.
It's messed up, man. Well, dude, what's next for you? It's been really, really interesting talking to you. I didn't know all this was going on, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Well, what's next for me is just more of the same. I like I said, I spend most of my time working with veterans, like primarily SEALs, but I work with some other veterans. I have my private, clients that really pay the bills. Like but all the same stuff. I've I don't know that it's scalable. What I do isn't really that scalable. But the message I'm always really trying to get out is that, most of health is lifestyle, and so I sometimes call what I do lifestyle medicine because I work with, sleep's a huge one, right? That's the whole reason I had any success with the SEALs is because one of the first things I noticed was their sleep problems, right? And of course, their SEALs, they don't complain about. So they never complained about sleep. They came in and they told me all their problems. They never complained about their sleep. But it just hit me how many of them were taking Ambien. And I'm like, why are you all taking Ambien? Right? I'm like, well, they just give us this. And then you start questioning them, and then they'll tell you, oh yeah, I don't really sleep. I take 2 to 3 times the recommended dosage of Ambien because I've been taking it so long. I chase that with a few cocktails. And then I go sleep and I wake up at like 3:30 in the morning. I can't go back to sleep. And I go, well, I'm going to go to the gym, work out really hard, not take a nap today, push it till bedtime, and I'll sleep well at night. They've been doing that for 5 or 6 years. Hasn't worked yet. It's like probably not going to work. Like we probably need to do something else. And so, when I learned enough about, I didn't have any classes on sleep in medical school. I knew nothing about sleep that the SEALs didn't know. But when I educated myself on it and figured out what's going on and how the hormones are regulated while you're asleep and how that's where you get stronger, that's where you get faster, that's where your memories are formed, that's where you emotionally categorize, like all this amazing stuff happening during the sleep that could explain all of their symptoms if their sleep wasn't quality. So I said, I got to get them off of Ambien. And that's why we came up with the sleep supplement that we have. Is just like the SEALs helped me develop that, because I didn't know. I didn't know anything about supplements. And so I just had them go, I just did research like, hey, what helps with sleep and why? And so we just put it all together piece by piece and figured out how much to take of everything. And it took us about 6 months. And then all the SEALs used that to get off of Ambien. And just getting off of Ambien and improving their sleep and taking just some daytime supplements that they had already been taking, triple, quadruple their testosterone.
Wow.
Decrease their inflammation by an order of magnitude, decrease their oxidation. So sleep is huge. It is. I used to say there's 4 pillars: sleep, exercise, nutrition, and then stress mitigation. Now I say there's exercise, nutrition, stress mitigation sits on the platform of sleep.
Wow, it's number one.
Because if you don't do sleep, you can't do the other ones. Like, what you eat changes, like what your body does with the food you eat changes with how well you sleep. So if you get a terrible night's sleep, what your body will do with this exact same thing, you eat the exact same thing 2 days in a row, but you sleep badly, sleep poorly one night, sleep well the other night. What your body does with it, as far as like, does it preferentially store it as fat? Does it use it as energy? It's called fuel partitioning. Like where does it put the calories? That changes what you crave, how hungry you are, how much you will eat, your brain's registration of whether or not you're full when you're eating. All of that's determined by sleep. And so if you don't get good sleep, it's really hard to control your nutrition, right? Because your brain thinks you're starving.
Yeah.
Right? The only animal on the planet that sleep deprives itself is humans on purpose, right? Every other animal will only sleep deprive themselves if they're being stalked, like if they're worried about being prey, or if they're starving and they need to wake up earlier to be able to travel further and look for food. And so evolutionarily, our brains believe that we're starving or we're being stalked. And so we sleep deprive ourselves. Our bodies, in the next days, when we wake up, our body's like, oh, well, our brain and body are like, well, we must be in some sort of danger.
Yeah.
And so we're going to store fat like we're in famine. And we want to get as much blood glucose as possible to keep our brains going, because we're obviously starving. And so you're going to crave sugar and fat. And that's where the donut comes from, I'd say. And then, of course, when you exercise, you get weaker, right? You go to the gym. If you go to the gym, you do anything worth doing, you come out of the gym weaker than you went into the gym. When you sleep, your body uses what you did in the gym as the template for what you need to be better at tomorrow, and it repairs you in a way to where you can do the same work tomorrow that you did today with a little less damage to your cells. And that's how you get progressively stronger. That's how you get progressively more enduring. So if you don't sleep well, you don't recover well, exercising the next day is a waste of time, because you didn't recover from yesterday. You're going to exercise again today, and then even if you get a good night's sleep now, it's not enough time to recover from 2 days of exercise, right? And then the stress mitigation, controlling your stress is the key to all health and longevity. Like that is imperative. But it takes 8 hours to recover from being awake for 18 hours, right?
Mm-hmm. 16.
Right? 16 hours, sorry. So you're awake for 16 hours, it takes 8 hours to recover. So you have to repair and then prepare. You have to like restock all the nutrients, restock the shelf, so to speak. And that takes 8 hours. If you choose 6 instead of 8, because you want to get up early and get after it and be the winner, well, you didn't complete the process. You didn't repair and prepare 100%. Tomorrow still comes at exactly the same time. What do? Your body compensates by releasing stress hormones. And stress hormones are what break you down. Stress hormones are catabolic. Stress hormones are what age you. If you could go to sleep and repair and prepare 100% every night, you'd never age. You'd wake up exactly the same every day, right? So to the extent you can't recover, that's aging. So you're choosing to age faster. But the point is, if I sleep 6 hours tonight instead of 8 hours, my body's going to compensate in the morning by releasing more cortisol, more epinephrine, more norepinephrine, more stress hormones, which are catabolic. They're aging me. They're breaking me down. And then I'm going to have a hard time sleeping tonight because I'm going to have too high of stress hormones. Right. And so when I say stress mitigation is something like meditation, breath work, prayer, progressive muscle relaxation, certain types of yoga, tai chi, like those things lower your stress hormones. Well, if you wake up with 30% higher stress hormones and you do your stress mitigation techniques today, all you're doing is getting back down to where you would have been if you wouldn't have cut yourself out of sleep, right? You aren't doing yourself any favor. So that's why I say sleep is the foundation for all this, and you have to do that. And you know, all the stuff that I use, and we've touched on maybe 25% of the tools I use, but the most powerful thing I have is like this simple little worksheet to help people get stress out of their sleep. Because everybody, if you sleep poorly in a Western country, it's almost certainly because of stress.
Wow.
And it's like this simple little, form you fill out.
We'll link
like
it in the video below.
Yeah, a couple of little alarm clock tricks and a little bit of psychological coaching of yourself. Practice that for 3 or 4 weeks. You'll never have a problem sleeping again.
Yeah, I know when I was younger, I could get away with 5-6 hours, but as I get older, I feel it more.
Yeah, you're so resilient when you're young, and your body responds so well to stress hormones, right? So stress hormones actually make you feel good, which is why, to an extent, like you think of fight or flight. You almost get in a car crash, you get in a fist fight or something like that. You're in fight or flight. You're like in the survival mode. You're not going to fall asleep. Like you're not going to quit paying attention to stuff, right? You're going to be super alert. You're strong. You're fast. Your reflexes are great. Like you feel great. Like you might be stressed, but you feel physically great. You feel very capable. So if you're using stress hormones to compensate for poor sleep, you wake up feeling pretty good, especially when you're young and your body responds well to them and you can handle the stress hormones. But when you do that chronically, then chronically elevated stress hormones like that will actually age you faster and make you more, make you sicker, decrease your immune function, decrease cardiac function, all sorts of bad stuff happens from it.
Yeah.
So that's why people will say, I feel great after 5 hours of sleep. Because you're running around with stress hormones. Yeah, get the stress hormones out. Terrible.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. Well, we'll link the quiz below on your website. Anything else you want to link?
No, that's good.
That's good?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for hopping on, man. That was fun. We'll have to do a part 2 for sure.
Is that an hour already?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Thanks.